All right, we're couch coaches. So we are back on 2020 Power Five Madness 3 NCAA preview. We got the 12 this week. Once again, we got our guy Zach from the podcast joining us. What's going on, Zach?
Not much, man. Not much. Just excited, man. We had high school football today. We have a big lower D1 matchup tonight, and then next week, man, it gets rolling.
Yeah, and we're in some cases 2 weeks away from the start of the Power Five conference, and actually we aim tonight.
Yep.
Late game. So we are headed to the finish line, and looks like we're gonna, for the most part, I knock on wood, but we're gonna put our previews, and we talk about the Big 12 today. So the Big 12. So that's my first question preview. So could the Big 12 college ball play?
Oh man, I would be shocked to be completely honest with you. I would be absolutely shocked. But in a year like 2020, I really, really hesitate to say it's going to be impossible for that to happen. I think the reason it's going to be hard is the ACC has teams like Clemson, Notre Dame, UNC, who are all going to be top 12 teams coming into the season. And then the SEC has 6 of the top 10 teams in that conference. So you're going to have to find a way, hope those conferences cannibalize each other. For me, I think the Big 12 is going to be deeper than it has been in recent years, especially because it has a really, really bad perception. I mean, we always hear it's Oklahoma and everybody else. That's not the case this year. It's Oklahoma and a whole bunch of contenders. I think it's going to rely on a few things. One, Oklahoma State is going to have to take that elite jump that some experts expect them to take. Oklahoma State's going to have to win a lot of games. They're going to have to be up there with Texas and Oklahoma at the end of the season. The second thing is that Baylor is going to have to be really, really good in Dave Aranda's first year. I think they could be. We'll probably cover them a little bit later, but Dave Aranda's an elite coach. He was the defensive coordinator for that LSU team last year who won the national championship. So he has big time experience, and I think he's going to bring that. And then the two X factors are going to be Kansas State and Iowa State. And they're going to have to be top 15, top 20 teams and gives the Oklahomas, the Oklahoma States, the Texases some rank wins to hang their hat on and help build that resume. So they're going to have to be good, but not good enough to beat the upper level teams. Because if Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State have 2-3 losses and this conference cannibalizes itself, they're going to be in a lot of problems. But the key to getting 2 teams in this year is going to be having 2 undefeated teams and then a 1-loss team going into conference championship weekend. And that's going to be a lot harder in this conference because everyone plays each other. In the SEC, not everybody plays each other. Florida doesn't play Alabama. Auburn doesn't have to go play Florida. These bigger teams don't all play each other like it does in the Big 12. So that's a huge, I guess, negative takeaway from this getting 2 teams in for the Big 12. And this could be a little bit off track, but I think it also plays a key role is that the AAC, who, in case someone doesn't know, is probably the number 1 group of 5 conference. They have Cincinnati, they have Memphis, they have UCF. That conference is going to have a good shot to crash the college football playoff based on the AP poll this week. They released it. Cincinnati is going to be 13th when they do the ring break. So they're going to be right there on the fringe top 10. UCF's going to be 14 and Memphis is going to be 17. If one of these teams makes a run and goes undefeated, they're going to have rank wins to hang their hat on. And that strength of schedule argument is not going to be there because Memphis went to New Year's Six Bowl last year and competed with Penn State. UCF has beaten Auburn. They came within 1 score of LSU. So that perception of this conference isn't as low as some average fans think. And the other thing is, in a COVID different year, all these higher ranked teams play each other. Alabama, who's number 2, plays number 3, number 5, number 8, and number 9. And so can they get past those games? And then a lot of those teams play each other as well. 5 plays 8, 9 plays 8, all this kind of stuff. And then in the ACC, Clemson plays number 7 ranked Notre Dame and number 12 ranked UNC. And then 7 and 12 also play each other in UNC and Notre Dame. Plus, they have the championship game. So that's a huge, huge takeaway for me in this AP poll. And so this is going to work into the favor of the AAC teams. So I'm not saying no, but I'm saying that I would not put my money on the Big 12 getting 2 teams in.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost alluding to my point, going into the second question. Let me pull that back up there. So, so who are the legitimate threats? Which teams that pose as a legitimate threat to Oklahoma?
It's a clear one for me. It's probably not the one that you're thinking or anybody listening is thinking, and it's one that even on my own podcast, I've been chastised by my co-host Brandon about, and that's the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They're the biggest threat to Oklahoma this year, even over Texas. When a team has arguably the best running back in the entire country and arguably the best wide receiver in this conference, I think that team would most of the time be the favorite. Chuba Hubbard's coming off a 2,000-yard season and where he had 21 rushing touchdowns. He led the country in rushing yards. He tied with Jonathan Taylor for that number 1 spot, and he was top 3 in rushing touchdowns. That's a huge, huge player coming back for this Oklahoma State team. You also have Tylan Wallace. He played 9 games last year. He tore his ACL and kept him out of these later games, which really hurt Oklahoma State. They lost to Baylor toward the end of the year. They lost to Oklahoma. They played close games against multiple schools that they could have won if they had Tylan Wallace back there. 2018, he had 1,500 receiving yards, and he also had 12 touchdowns. That was 2 and 8th in the country in terms of the entire country. So Tylan Wallace is an elite player. And even last year, in only a little bit of action, he already was only 100 yards away from another 1,000-yard season, and he didn't even play the last 4 or 5 games. So Tylan Wallace is that elite presence that can really hurt a team like Oklahoma, whose secondary is their biggest weakness. You don't want a wide receiver like Tylan Wallace matched up against some of these DBs because Oklahoma can't stop him. For me, the biggest key to this threat is Spencer Sanders. He's the quarterback, and he really, really, really hurt this team last year. He had 62% completion percentage, not bad, but he only threw about 8 yards per attempt. He does not have the ability to attack the middle of the field. He lives on the screen pass game, and that's not a key to success. He's going to have to develop more consistency and show an ability to throw deep over the middle because an Oklahoma team, that's where their weakness is. So Spencer Sanders is going to have to make that jump for Oklahoma State to win. Now, on the defensive side of the ball is where I'm really high on this team. They have probably the best safety duo in the Big 12 with Trey Sterling and Colby Harville-Peel. Sterling, very, very versatile. I know I was on this podcast and talked about Javon Holland. He is cut from that same cloth. He is very, very versatile. He played about equal number of snaps in the slot, in the box, and at deep safety, and put up a 70 or 70 plus grade at every single alignment, according to Pro Football Focus. 70 tackles there, an interception, 8 pass breakups. This kid's all over the field. And with Harville-Peel, he had more combined interceptions and passes defended than any other safety in the country. So he's an elite ball hawk. So you have a guy who's versatile and can play everywhere. And then you have another guy who you can rely to go make plays on the ball and make those game-changing plays in Harville-Peel. And, that's why Oklahoma State really bothers me because they have all the pieces that you see in a contender except the quarterback, and it's the most important position on the field. And that's why I'm kind of hesitant about them right now. And the second threat, I know you were expecting this, Texas is the other threat to Oklahoma. And this is more of a long shot for me, mostly because, outside of Sam Ehlinger, they don't have much. Sam Ehlinger, senior, coming in, back-to-back 3,000-yard seasons, 32 touchdowns last season, but he had double-digit interceptions, which is a little concerning for me. And the reason I bring up Sam Ehlinger, he's so good, but his wide receiving unit ranks 114th out of all 130 Division I teams. So he has no help on the outside of that offense, which really sets me back on how good he can be in his senior year. This bothers me because Texas has had so many elite wide receivers come out of that state. You got Jalen Waddle a few years ago that Bama came in there and took, and look at what he's doing down in Tuscaloosa. 4 of the top 30 wide receivers came out of the state of Texas last year, and Texas managed to land not a single one of them. That's an indictment on the recruiting that's going on down there in terms of the Texas Longhorns, because the number one recruit in the state of Texas should be going to Texas. And that's my opinion. And that's because I grew up when they had Vince Young and Mac Brown had that team competing for national titles. And there's no reason other teams across the country should be coming in and taking the elite talent that I know Texas wanted. They lost the number one wide receiver last year to Texas A&M, who's their rival, who they don't even play, who has been marginally successful, to say the least, in the SEC, and they could not land him over them. That's a huge, huge issue I see. But one of the bright spots is the running back position. Keontae Ingram is back. He produced over has yet to produce over 1,000 yards rushing, but he's becoming better and better in terms of his production throughout the game. And then they landed 5-star Bijan Robinson out of Arizona last year. He was a very, very highly touted recruit. He was top 20, I believe, in terms of the 247 composite. He's coming off 3 straight seasons in high school in which he ran for over 2,000 yards. He also is coming off of 2 straight seasons where he had 30 or more touchdowns. So this is a huge plus for Sam Ehlinger, but can defenses, I guess, trust Ehlinger to find a go-to wide receiver? And I really, really question that, which is why Oklahoma State for me is above Texas. The defense also worries me. They ranked 59th out of 130 FBS teams coming in, and both their pass rush and their secondary are outside the top 60. So it gives me no hope they can rush the passer or create turnovers in throughout a game. And with a team like Oklahoma, whose offense is so good, I need to see more improvement from that defense. And I'm not saying that Texas can't get it together, but for them to be a top 10 team and to be seen as the biggest threat against Oklahoma is a little bit outrageous to me.
Yeah. Oklahoma State was definitely the dark horse. I
Mhm.
definitely did not expect that at all.
I really like him. If you haven't watched
Hmm.
Chuba Hubbard play, that
Yeah,
kid
nice.
is a grown man. A grown man.
Yeah. So, we talked about so now the players to watch in the Big 12.
Yeah, it's the obvious ones I've already talked about with Sam Ehlinger, Chuba Hubbard. You even have Spencer Rattler in Oklahoma, but I want to focus on some other players that you might not have heard of. And the first one is Puka Williams Jr. out of Kansas. He's a running back. Nobody's heard about this kid, but going to Kansas State, I've got to see him play a few times, and this kid is elite, man. And if you don't know Puka, get ready because his name's could be called for your favorite NFL team because he's going to the NFL because he's that good. And if he was playing anywhere outside of Lawrence, Kansas, he would be a star in the college football world. But being stuck down there in Kansas where they get 5 fans a game, it's hard to be a star in that program. But he's going for his 3rd straight year of 1,000 yards rushing, and he had 14 touchdowns over the past 2 years. He started his true freshman and sophomore year. He was 3rd in the Big 12 in rushing both years as a true freshman and a true sophomore. So I'm looking for him to make that next jump as a junior. And he actually ranked by Pro Football Focus as the 2nd most broken tackles per attempt in 2018. So his explosiveness and ability to make plays when they're not there is what makes this kid so special. And the one criticism I have, the reason he's a breakout player, not a star, is I need to see him put it in the end zone more. He doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. He makes big plays, but doesn't finish those big plays. So I need to see when he breaks out a huge run, put that final touch on it and get those points, because those could be the difference between winning the football game and just being competitive. We saw them take Texas to overtime last year, but they could not finish the close games. And these small things where you get tracked down after breaking a 55-yard run could be the difference between winning and not winning that game. And that's why Kansas, I think, has been on the outskirts of competing for the Big 12 lately. The only problem is the offensive line at Kansas ranks 105th in the country. That is horrible. I think me and you could suit up and probably start for the Kansas Jayhawks. That's how bad that offensive line is. And Williams still is going to run for 1,000 yards even with that. So imagine if he had an offensive line like they have at Oklahoma or Alabama or something like that. This kid would be putting up Heisman-worthy numbers. And that's why I really can't. I hope he declares the draft after this year, because I don't want to see him in his senior year have to play against such a bad offensive line again. And speaking of, I want to move to the defensive side of the ball. I'm a huge defensive guy, and I have Terrell Bernard here from Baylor. He's a linebacker, and some people might not consider him a breakout player, but I do, because if you ask the average fan about this kid, they probably don't know about him. I love playmaking linebackers that can tackle, that can cover, and can cover all, I guess, the entire width of the field, and that's what Bernard brings. He had over 110 tackles last year, almost 10 for loss, 4.5 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries. That's a jump in production when he didn't even put up 50 tackles his freshman season. So he made a huge jump in development from year 1 to year 2. He ranked first in the conference in assisted tackles and second in total tackles in the Big 12 last year. And he ranked third in plays where he was the first defender to the ball. So he is always in the right position, and you can't teach that in a linebacker. That is, they either have that natural instinct to see where the play is going or they don't. And for me, I think now he has one of the greatest defensive minds in the country. I talked earlier, Dave Aranda is now stepping into the head coach position, and he had that LSU defense flying to the ball every year in and year out. And he's going to follow in the steps of someone, I don't know how many people remember this kid, Devin White at LSU, where he's athletic, he can cover, he can stop the run inside the box. Bernard reminds me of White a lot, and I think he's going to follow in those footsteps where he's going to make an impact not only on the field at Baylor, but also for whatever NFL team is up drafting him. Some scouts have him as a top 20 player in the next year's draft already, and I think in Aranda's system, he could be even better than that. And this next player is a little bit change of pace. I don't think I've ever done this on a podcast before. I have a special teams player, and it's Joshua Youngblood out of Kansas State. I go to Kansas State. I know this kid personally. He was the Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Year last year. He was on multiple All-American teams, and he was a unanimous All-Big 12 pick by the coaches. This was all in his true freshman season. So this kid was 18, playing strictly special teams, didn't get a lot of snaps at wide receiver, which is his true position. And now he comes back his second year, should be better on the offensive side of the ball. But this kid reminds me of Devin Hester. He already passed Devin Hester in terms of how many kick return touchdowns he has. He has the potential to take every time he has the ball in his hands, that thing's going to the house, or it has a chance to. On 14 kickoff returns, he had 502 yards and averaged 36 yards per kick return, and returned 3 last year as a true freshman. That was first in the conference in return yards, second in the NCAA in yards per return, and he was first in the NCAA in kick return touchdowns, of course. And he already ranked 7th all-time in conference history. So this kid is explosive. Youngblood is going to be a serious, serious factor for Kansas State in that rebuild that Chris Klieman is trying to, I guess, manage up here. But he needs 4 more kick return touchdowns to pass Justin Gilbert for the number 1 in conference history, and only needs 5 more to be first all time in NCAA history. And he still has 3 more years to play. So that shows how good this kid is. And he's very outspoken. He's already a team leader. In case people don't know, I do go to Kansas State right now. He was the student who led the protest up here and the boycott after George Floyd's passing in national news. Joshua Youngblood, a true freshman, was the team leader on that. That shows you how much respect he garners from his teammates and how much his coaches, teammates, fans respect this kid. This kid's special. He has the it factor. And even if he might not be a very good linebacker, he can carve out a Devin Hester type role where you just get him for his leadership and prowess on punt and kick returns. And that's the last thing I need to see. Can he return punts? Last year they didn't let him because I think they wanted to focus on kick. Well, their punt returner is gone now, so can he step into that role and be a Devin Hester type where he's a threat no matter when he has the ball? And I want to see what he can do at wide receiver. Kansas State stacked at wide receiver, so I don't expect him to be a starter, but can he carve out a screen type wildcat role with his explosiveness? And that's where I want to see him grow. And one last player for you, man. Trayvon Morig out of TCU. He's a safety. This kid is another one. I don't know if it's a breakout because he's probably the best player on this TCU team, but a lot of people don't know him because it's TCU. And he racked up 62 total tackles, 4 interceptions, 11 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles as a true sophomore last year. Another huge jump in production. He ranked second among all Power 5 defensive backs in combined interceptions and pass breakups last year. He was only behind Derek Stingley in that. And he has some of the best ball skills for a true safety and graded out at 92% by Pro Football Focus, which is one of the top 5 highest grades for a safety last year. He has elite ball skills, shows efficient tackling, and he recognizes the play. He studies the game well enough where he's in the right spot, whether it's a pass, a run, whatever you want to throw at him. This kid's always in the right spot. And 2 years from now, I expect him to have a first-round NFL grade, and he could be a sneaky reason the TCU Horned Frogs can sneak up on a lot of teams this year.
Nice. TCU fighting Andy Dalton.
Mm-hmm. Man, that you can never sleep on them, man. It's insane how well Gary Patterson has done down there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do like that idea of us being linemen with Les Miles down in Kansas.
Yes,
That'd be a
the Mad Hatter.
dynamic. Yes, indeed. He's a leader of men.
That's I think Kansas has turf, so he's probably upset that he can't keep eating grass.
Grass, yeah. I was going to say, I thought about, I was like, we can't eat grass because the turf, but So, and now with it, as we alluded last couple of podcasts, where pretty much these are conference only schedules. So, what are the matchups that we need to watch for in the Big 12?
Yeah, I think the first one, I know you knew it was coming. Anybody who even understands football knew it was coming, and that's Oklahoma, Texas. The Red River Shootout rivalry, whatever ending you want to put on it. I know they had a big debate on what to call it, but it's the Red River, whatever you want to call it. This game's obvious, man. This game could determine the Big 12 depending on it is. And the reason I put it here, not only because of the game, it's week 3. So not much experience is going to come to Spencer Sanders before this game. And is he ready for this moment? Because this isn't just another conference game. This is the game of all games for Oklahoma. Oklahoma can win the national championship, but if you lose this game against Texas, that is going to be just the biggest black mark on Spencer Rattler's legacy of all time. I mean, you remember a few years ago when Oklahoma went to the playoffs, they lost to Texas in the Kyler Murray's year. They never lived that down. Everyone was like, man, how did they not beat Texas? They lost 48-45. It wasn't like it was a blowout, but you can't lose to Texas when you're Oklahoma. And Lincoln Riley's going to have this team rolling. But the thing I'm worried about is in a COVID-altered offseason, Texas has a lot of experience in key places coming back where Oklahoma does not. Can Oklahoma get enough experience during the first 2 weeks of the season to put Texas away? And I'm really interested to see this because Sam Ehlinger, this is his 4th Red River game that he's played in. So no one's going to be more ready for this moment than Sam Ehlinger. And we don't know how many fans are going to be allowed in the Cotton Bowl because it's a neutral site game rather than a school game. So I don't know whose plan they're going to go with. The stadium's pretty big, so we'll see what they do with fans. But if it's even close to 50%, it's still going to be a huge environment for Spencer Rattler to step up and see if he can lead this Oklahoma team to the promised land. The next one also involves Texas. Week 6, Oklahoma State versus Texas. Who's going to be the biggest threat to Oklahoma? And this game could determine who goes to the Big 12 championship as well. If Texas loses to Oklahoma, they cannot afford to lose this game. So, and if they beat Oklahoma and Oklahoma State has a chance to knock off Texas, that could almost eliminate Oklahoma from Big 12 championship contention if they don't win a later game against Oklahoma State. So this game determines a lot, and I think I'm really really interested to see Sam Ellinger against that really really good secondary of Oklahoma State that I covered earlier. Can he avoid turnovers, which has been an issue as of last year? Can he be consistent? We've seen in some of the biggest games that Sam Ellinger has played in, he's shrunk. So he has to step up big. And so that's why I'm really, really looking at this game. And this is week 6. So there's still a lot of games to be played after this game. So for Texas to have their 2 biggest games in their first 6 weeks is a huge, huge advantage to Texas because they have more experience in a lot of these teams. And then that goes to week 7. This is going to be a weird matchup at first, but a later segment will cover it. I have Baylor versus Iowa State. This is going to determine who's a true contender and who's just a pretender. I want to see the elite Baylor defense, which I covered Terrell Bernard just a minute ago. He's just one piece to that elite defense. Can he beat Brock Purdy and the electric Iowa State offense that they have? Because Iowa State has one of the top 10 offenses in the country going into the season. So this game is going to be a perfect matchup to watch if you're a true college football fan. And these teams, Baylor, first-year head coach, really not sure what to expect, but they made the Big 12 championship last year. Iowa State is always in the mix. Who could take that next step and really try to, I guess, crash the party at the end of the season in the Big 12 championship in Jerry World? And the last game, another one where it's probably like, okay, I knew this one was coming. Oklahoma State, the Bedlam game. This game probably is going to determine who goes to the Big 12 championship. And it could even be the thing where Texas slips up a few places and it's already decided. And they have to play in back-to-back weeks for the Big 12 championship. So this is a huge matchup to watch. Last year, Oklahoma State had a lot of injuries. They were at like 50% maybe. Chuba Hubbard was banged up. Tylan Wallace was out. Spencer Sanders was playing god-awful. So Oklahoma caught Oklahoma State at the perfect time. I'll pray. Even I don't really care who wins per se because I'm not a fan of either of these teams. I just want to see both teams at full strength. What can they do? Is Spencer Sanders going to improve enough to give me any hope here? Is Spencer Rattler going to develop appropriately and develop and be a game changer by this time? Because this is the second to last week of the season, I believe. Is he going to be mature enough to win a big game like this? Is Chuba Hubbard healthy? Is Tylan Wallace healthy? Is Mike Gundy got control of his team again? Is Lincoln Riley ready for a moment like this? There's so many questions that go into determining who wins this matchup. And I don't think I've been more excited for a Big 12 matchup in a long time than this game, because I think these two teams are the 2 best teams in the conference. And I think this game is going to determine everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring up the Oklahoma State aspect, because that's another big question mark going into the season. And this is
Yep.
like a make or break year for them, where, like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, where we've seen the divide during the off season, and now we're gonna see if it still exists.
I mean, team chemistry, especially because you didn't have all those practices in the offseason to develop that chemistry, is going to be huge. And going into the season, before Mike Gundy did what he did, I would have told you no team is going to be on a hotter roll or have more chemistry than Oklahoma State. Now I'm not sure, man. Now there's a huge question mark. And are they going to play hard for him? Are they going to, like, it could go 2 ways. They're either going to, not really boycott, but they're not going to play as hard for him because they don't respect him. And that's going to hurt Oklahoma State. They're going to have a terrible season. Or they rally together and play well for themselves. And this team got closer because of what Mike Gundy did. And so now they're trying to say, we're going to play for each other. Screw this guy. And they're going to have an amazing season. And then you're going to see a mass exodus to the NFL. And that's something that Oklahoma State's done real well in recent years. If you remember, Chuba Hubbard could have went to the draft, but he came back because he loved this team and loved what they were doing. And then for Mike Gundy just to throw that all away is it was. I remember we covered it when it happened on our podcast, and I don't think I've been more disappointed in anything because this team had so much potential, and he threw it all away for just the dumbest thing in the entire world you could have done. Like, and I don't want to hear any excuses from him where he was like, I didn't know how this would affect my team. It's like, yes, you did. Like, if you watched that channel like you claimed to do, then you knew what they were covering. You knew the time that this country was going through. You knew exactly what was going on. And for him to claim he didn't watch the show, but that they sent him merch is probably the worst and just most ignorant explanation of an action that I've ever seen. And I think then the report that came out, I don't know if you covered it or heard, there was a guy who interviewed people inside the program. He refers to players by their number. He doesn't get to know their name. He had a kid who had a heart disease who passed out and almost died on the field and called him Nick Diaz, an MMA UFC fighter, instead of his real name. Didn't know the kid's name, didn't show any empathy toward the kid, told the team it was fine. They continued to practice. I mean, this guy, to have this program where it is, blows my mind, because any coach that can't even learn my kid's name, my kid's not going to that program. You think Nick Saban doesn't know a single player's name on his roster? I would bet money he doesn't. Same for Dabo Sweeney, same for Kirby Smart, any great coach you have. For to have such a toxic environment and for them to still be so successful speaks more to how talented this team really is than it does Mike Gundy being a good coach. And if I'm really interested to see, I think Mike Gundy's time is ticking. If they don't, I guess, compete with Oklahoma, I won't even say make the Big 12 championship. I think Mike Gundy should be out the door because that's how good this team is. And if they don't make it, I'm pinning it all on Mike Gundy and what he did and how he ran this program to the reason why Oklahoma State isn't the best team in the Big 12.
And what's funny about with him, with Gundy, he's this proud alum. He's
Mm-hmm.
the prodigal son. So
Yep.
in essence, he gets that leash. It's almost how I used to surmise as Cliff Kingsbury at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
He was a prodigal son, and he could do no wrong. And Texas Tech was just like, look, we're done. Like we're where we at, we're done. We can't have you here anymore. And the same thing going to happen to him, where I think, like you said, he's going to lose recruits, especially off the strength of that, where, like you said,
Yes.
and just the ignorance of it, of not kind of just owning up to it in a sense, where it's like, and
Mm-hmm.
it's almost kind of go back to, I'm a man, I'm 40, where
Yep.
he did that to kind of grandstand, not in essence to defend the kid, because now I look at it on the surface, like, he did that for the soundbite, because I
Right.
mean, what, 13
Mm-hmm.
years ago he did that, and it's still kind of memorable. And to show you, like, kind of like almost like the personality, and kind of harkens back to what you were saying as far as how he has situations with the players where he don't even know their name. Like, you go in these people's houses and you recruit them and you don't know their name.
Yep.
Like,
That it would I wouldn't let my kid go there if I heard
absolutely not.
something like that, or my
No.
kid almost dies on your practice field and you don't even know his name and you don't care, you don't stop practice, you don't go check on him, anything like that. And like you said, he has that one moment where people are saying, "Look how he cares about his players." Well, I take into account more data points rather than one big data point. Just because it's famous doesn't mean that's how he actually feels. If I have 19, 20 examples of where he doesn't care as much as you think about the kids. And that should weigh more than one shining moment 13, 14 years ago, in which we don't even know technically the context. Like, I've read where he had a problem with the reporter more so than what he said about the kid. And so it was like, was that a beef between him and the reporter, or was that him actually caring about the player? And I, I told my co-host I have such a lack of respect for Mike Gundy as a person that it's a problem. Like, it's hard for me to be unbiased. And there's just so many players I like on this team, and I want to see him go. I want to see them hire someone like Tony Elliott at Clemson, the offensive coordinator. Tony Elliott deserves a head coaching job somewhere because of what he's done at Clemson recruiting and everything like that. I want to see Brett Venables get a head coaching job. I want to see some of these really, really, really good assistant coaches get some positions. And just because Mike Gundy might be a part of like this good old boys club at Oklahoma State doesn't mean he should keep his job because outside of I believe it was 2011 they finished third in the BCS. Outside of that, has he done anything to garner keeping that job? Would anybody else get to keep their job if they did what Mike Gundy did with the lack of success that he's had at Oklahoma State?
No. No,
Eh,
not in this, not in no college football climate where you're what have you done for me lately?
Exactly. And that's why like I think if Mike Gundy goes, I will vouch. It is hashtag hire Tony Elliott from Clemson because he's an offensive minded coach who has an explosive offense in the ACC. Could you imagine what he could do with the type of talent that offense has at Oklahoma State, and that he can bring some coaches from Clemson to help rebuild that defense? That's a way better option than having Mike Gundy not respecting student athletes and doing questionable things over and over. And there's people in the community that appreciate them, but they're also part of that good old boy club that all are connected and that all like cover each other's you know what's.
Yep.
And it bothers me a lot because there's a lot of people who are kept out of a job because of a club like that. And Oklahoma State, I think, needs to make a business decision really, really soon. And once you're at a program for as long as Mike Gundy's been at Oklahoma State, I think your potential's reached. I don't think there's any upward trajectory with this. Like, if you can't win a national championship after coaching almost 20 years at a university, you're probably not going to win the national championship. It took 2 seasons for Nick Saban to do it at Alabama. It Look at what Dan Mullen's doing in year 3 at Florida. Look at what Dabo did in year like I think it was 4 or 5 at Clemson. It doesn't take long to know you have the right coach. And I think Mike Gundy just has connections in the right places, and that's the only reason he still has this job.
Absolutely. Yeah. So round out the preview. Who wins the Big 12?
Man, listen, and based on just what we talked about, I before the Mike Gundy situation happened, I had Oklahoma State. I really did. You can go back and listen to our podcast. Oklahoma State was my pick, but Sanders scares me. Gundy's ignorance scares me, and this team chemistry is a big question mark. On the flip side, the other choice is Oklahoma. They have a lot of unproven talent. But did a COVID altered all season really hurt them? Did they really, you know, how did they develop team chemistry? How did they develop just talent in general? How did they feel? How did they replace CD Lamb? How do they replace Kenneth Murray? Those are huge question marks for this team. And can Spencer Rattler get it rolling immediately? Because there's going to be no, let's just say, like North Iowa teams. I mean, there's going to be no easy games along this schedule. It's going to be Big 12, Big 12, Big 12, week in and week out. And so this kid's going to have to grow up on the fly. And then that defense, can it take the next step? Last year, it was much improved from 2018. Can it take another step? It's going to have to. But I was 100% going to pick Oklahoma State before Gundy's ignorant decision. But team chemistry and the quarterback are too important. So I'm going with Oklahoma over Oklahoma State to win the Big 12, as much as it pains me because Chuba Hubbard is that good. Tylen Wallace is that good. That defense is that good. But Oklahoma has it rolling. Lincoln Riley has control of that team 100%. And I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. And if anyone can turn an inexperienced but talented team into a contender in the Big 12, it's going to be Lincoln Riley.
Yeah. Oklahoma. Yes, indeed. So yeah.
Uh, it pains me. I mean, there's definitely some sleeper teams in this
Mhm.
conference, but Oklahoma, I think, is gonna have to. I think is gonna take it. Like I said, Texas is a few pieces away. I would say if they would have landed an elite wide receiver like Damon Demas, who A&M got, I could have changed my tune there. Oklahoma State, get rid of Mike Gundy. I could have picked you there.
Yeah.
But then there's some sleeper teams like Iowa State and Baylor who are really good, have a lot of stuff, but I don't see anyone knocking off Oklahoma as of right now.
Yeah. 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 So definitely appreciate you coming on today for the
For sure, man.
Big 12 conference. next week
It's the big one.
it's the big one. Well, personally with the Atlantic Coast Conference, so we're definitely gonna get that. So Zach, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, Instagram, it's at the underscore Blue Bloods. Twitter, it's at the underscore Blue Bloods. Facebook at the Blue Bloods Pod, or just look up the Blue Bloods CFB podcast. You can find us on YouTube, the Blue Blood CFB podcast there. We're on any and all streaming platforms. So just look up the Blue Bloods. We are there. So yeah, we appreciate any and all of you guys who check us out, man. It's been a blast coming on here. So I definitely, anytime you want to talk college football, man,
Absolutely.
always available.
Always down for college football.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, and as we alluded seconds ago, next week we'll shift the focus to the Atlantic Coast Conference. So we'll talk about that next week. And definitely appreciate you, Zach, for coming
For
on
sure.
today and just been pushing these previews. They loving it. They loving the, you know.
College
So
football, man. It's
yes,
one of a
indeed.
kind. One of a kind.
Yes, and we're at the finish line. We see the light at the end of the
Hmm.
tunnel. We're still knocking on wood,
Yes.
praying, but we see light at the end of the tunnel, and looks like we're gonna have it.
Yeah,
So,
it's coming. I mean, I'm hoping COVID can hold off a little bit. I know
mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, Auburn, I believe Florida State had a little outbreak, and so they had to cancel practice 2 or 3 days. But I think UNC made the right move, man. UNC sent students home.
Yep.
Now the players are technically in a bubble, and I think other universities are going to have to do that because
Yep.
students not following the rules are going to put these players at a really high risk, and we could lose a lot of money and a lot of good players not being able to play football this fall because students didn't pay attention.
Yeah, and and it's one of the things where the 18 to 22-year-old
This,
athletes. So it's kind of like you're saying, being having them around the gym pop of the actual campus. It does
hmm
pose as a threat, and like you said, I do. Yeah, I mean, literally have to isolate themselves,
yeah,
and letting the students, the non athletic students, go home, which is going to probably be the best thing for them. And
a
then
thousand percent.
yeah, I think it's definitely, and I think that's going to be the reason why we have a season. I think those type of
Yeah.
moves.
I think the ACC head medical chief advisors, whatever his title is, told us sent a memo to all the ACC teams. I think it was right after UNC sent everyone home.
Yep.
He said, if y'all want to have a college football season, these students got to go because
Yep.
they're putting these players at such an increased risk. And the good thing is, a lot of these players are taking online classes, but it's still not the same. I mean, Alabama, I believe in the first week had 500 something, some odd cases in just the first week of school. And I know Auburn had like 250, 300 last week, and a few players got it. And once it gets in the bubble, that bubble doesn't protect anybody. All that bubble does is spread it. And then you miss practices. And then you have players just say, okay, I felt horrible. Do I want to risk my health for this? And then you're going to have more players sit out. And we shouldn't chastise anyone who wants to sit out. But at the same time, as a fan, I, do, the I want to see so many players play. I want to see Gregory Rousseau play in Miami, even though he opted out. I want to see Rondale Moore play at Purdue. They got canceled. Justin Fields. I mean, if Trevor Lawrence opted out, I can't fault him for it, but my heart would break because I'm like, man, we don't get to see Trevor Lawrence suit up for Clemson anymore.
Yep.
That's a realization as a college football fan that I don't want to face. And I think these students are putting their fun and everything above the players. But at the same time, you can't fault an 18-year-old freshman going to college for going out because bringing them back, did y'all expect them to sit in the dorms all the time? I don't think anyone expected that. I mean, like we've all like, I mean, I say we've all been that age. I mean, I'm only 23 right now, and even though I'm a grad student, I don't go out. I still quarantine because I have a job now, and if I get it, then I lose pay, all this kind of stuff. But as an 18-year-old kid, would I have trusted myself not to go out? Probably not, because I don't want to sit in a crappy dorm my freshman year of college and I have all these friends going out and everything. I want to experience college life. So I get it. And I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on 18 to 22-year-old kids. I put the blame on the universities who valued tuition money over the health and the safety of a bunch of students because they're the ones in power and they're the ones who had the choice to do this or not. And now they put a bunch of people at risk.
Yeah, Absolutely. Yeah, man. Definitely appreciate you for coming on,
For
Zach.
sure, man.
And we'll do it one more time. We'll
One
do
more
the
time.
ACC next Saturday. So this has been the Big 12 preview, and we'll catch you guys next week.